Thank you for joining Ask an Expert, Challenging Behavior with Wendy Acri. This afternoon, we have the privilege of having Wendy share an overview of behavior works with us. Wendy's a board-certified behavior analysis and licensed independent social worker. She's passionate around helping to create bridges and assist with problem solving for children, families, and educators in which there are barriers within their social emotional pursuits. She graduated with a master's degree from the University of Iowa Social Work Program and earned her bachelor's in psychology from Drake University. She currently works at Des Moines Public Schools as a behavior analyst and previously worked 14 years at Heartland AEA. In between Des Moines Schools and Heartland, she lived in California and worked in a school district doing the same type of work, behavior specialist, and also worked as an independent contractor setting up behavior and learning programs for families with children with autism. Wendy comes as a mom. She has 2 children. Her daughter is 32 and her son is 22, and a 1-year-old granddaughter. From daughter and her husband, my son has high functioning autism, diagnosed when he was approximately 6 years old. As a child, was a recipient of the Iowa Children's Mental Health Waiver. So I really feel like I understand challenging behavior from a professional and personal perspective. I have a long-haired miniature dog named Max, who's my buddy. Outside of work, I enjoy traveling and photography. Wendy, already I'm excited to hear what you have to share with our audience this afternoon, and we're so looking forward to spending time with you. So thank you again for sharing your expertise. Wendy Acri.
Thank you so much, Deb. I'm excited to be able to share this information with you guys as well. And if you have questions and you don't think of them now or you think of them later, Deb and I have already talked and we should have a way to get those questions answered. I like to just start out with the thought that behavior happens because it works, whether it's behavior we want to see or it's behavior that interferes with things. Behavior occurs because it works. And that's kind of where we want to start out with what we're talking about. What I believe that you'll be able to expect through what we do today is that just kind of looking at behavior with a behavior lens. So what is it and how is it that we define it in a behavior analysis world, which is really at school what IDEA has identified. That's kind of what behavior plans are built around. We're going to talk through the purpose of behavior, most importantly, the functions of behavior. We'll talk more about that and how that helps us figure out how we might want to intervene. We're going to also dive in a little bit to what we call a 3-term contingency. That's the foundation of all learning, and I have some kind of animations that I'm going to share with you that I think will help bring that to life. We use 3-term contingencies all the time. We put money in a soda machine and because we're thirsty and the soda comes out and we drink it. That's a 3-term contingency. Again, like I said, behavior happens because it works. So if we have those interfering behaviors working a lot, it's happening because for some reason they're being reinforced. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about how we might respond to behaviors that are happening. If there are things we want to see, what we might want to do, and things that we aren't wanting to see or things that are real barriers, what we might do to address that. And then I've prepared just a page of resources that I hope you might find helpful. They're resources that I have used often, and I just think they're easy to read, but they provide lots of really good information. So to begin with, our basic assumptions with behavior is that it's an action. Behavior is something that we experience with our senses and we can measure. And that can be really tricky when we think about mental health, we think about feelings and emotions. We can't always see a feeling. We can sometimes see emotions, and we don't necessarily know if our perspective of what we're seeing echoes what the person who's displaying it does. So from a behavioral lens, we like to see things that without a doubt, we're all going to see the same, and we measure those things. So then we can tell if things are getting better or not, and that helps inform what we'll do next. So behavior is an action. It's something that you can experience with your senses. You can see it, you can hear it. Those are probably the two we use the most. Behavior is learned and it's used to meet our needs. So when we think about that, that's just a really powerful thing to think about. Behavior is learned. And if it's an action, almost everything we do is behavior, right? When we are reading, we learned how to do that. That's a behavior. Reading is a behavior that we've learned. We've learned how to identify sounds to the letters. When we ride a bike, that's something that we have learned. When we talk, that's something that we've learned. We do these things to meet our needs. Sometimes our behavior, our interfering behaviors, are really powerful and they work more quickly. And so we don't spend as much time maybe learning other ways because those ways that we're using meet our needs. Behavior, both positive behavior and continuing and interfering behaviors, continue because they do work. So that's what we're going to kind of get into as we start talking a little bit about change, is that we want interfering behaviors to not work as well, and we want those positive or those appropriate behaviors to work better if they're all meant to meet the same needs. The premise is that behavior is communication, and I've spoke a little bit to that. If we look at this picture to the left, think to yourself, what is that picture telling you? And then the picture to the right, what is it telling you? So the one to the left, there's a hammer and it's getting pounded on a cell phone. The picture to the right is a little girl crying. And just seeing that, we don't really know. We can identify the action, the behavior, but we don't necessarily know why. So let's think of and look at some reasons why. The little girl crying, we'll go to the picture on the right. Maybe she's saying, I don't want to play anymore. I don't want to do that. It's not fun anymore. Or maybe she's saying, I don't want to listen to the story. I want to do something different. Maybe she wants something that she can't access. Or maybe she just really is lonely and she wants to talk to someone. All of those behaviors might be why the little girl is crying, but they all have a different purpose, right? If I'm crying because I don't want to do something, in a behavior world, we look at that as escape or an avoid. We're using a behavior that maybe instead of, let's look at the first example, that playing, continuing, I see the little girl crying and I go over and I say, what is wrong? And she might say, I don't want to play. And I'll say, okay, let's do something different. Well, she's getting that need met to not play, but what brought it to my attention was the crying, right? Same thing, let's go down to this third one. I want the doll, or I want something. I'm crying. What is it that you want? I notice the tears. I'm the adult in the room. I want the computer. I want that toy. I'm using those tears. That's my signal. That's my communication that I want something. That's different than getting out of something, right? Fully different. But those tears, they mean different things, but it's the same behavior. Same thing with the attention. I want you to talk to me. I need help with this. I need reassurance. Maybe this little girl is just really anxious and she's scared and she's lonely. We don't know. But what we do know is that there's tears there, and our job then is to try to figure out what those tears mean. The second one is this man busting the phones or the computer. Again, that can mean a lot of different things, just like the little girl crying. It could mean, I don't want to talk to you. Go away. I know that my son, when he was a teenager, he was angry. It was hard for him to say, I'm angry, or leave me alone, or I need you. And he might use some kind of an aggressive behavior, not at me, but at slamming the door or pounding his fist on something. And that's what, in this first example, this first bullet, I don't want to talk to you. I don't know that I would ever take a hammer to my phone because we know how much they cost, but we certainly might turn that bad boy off and throw it in our purse or put it on the table or whatever. I want a new phone. This one stinks. I don't like it. It doesn't maintain connection. It has a crack in the screen already and I can't see it. I might display some aggression because I want something different. And that last bullet is, That's a tricky one. I want you to come into this room or know how mad I am, right? That's what I was talking about with my son. I want you to notice that I'm angry. We see that sometimes at school when kids slam their fists on the table or curse or call a name. They need help and they don't know how to ask for that. So if they do that, that probably will bring an adult closer to them. A behavior can look the same, but it meets different needs. And that's the trickiest part of really making behavior change, is understanding what needs that it meets. So this is a graphic. I put the website. I just really liked it, so I used it with their permission. But this is from Accessible ABA. And in a behavior world, through ABA, we look at behavior as having three main functions or purposes. The first two we're going to talk about more in depth. The third one is called automatic, and we'll talk about that one too briefly. With an access or a gain function, you're doing a behavior to get something. And what you want can be something that you can touch and hold. It could be attention, or it could be access to something. Escape or avoid, that's another functional class, that we're trying to get away from something. And that could be a person, that could be a social situation, it could be a task, it could be something that impacts our senses. I know my son had a real keen sense of smell and hearing, and he would often put his hands on his ears, and that would give me an indicator that he needed to get away from there. That was difficult for him. Those are our two, I would say, main behavior functions. And the reason I say that are those are the two that we have the best chance of making changes with. We can make some adjustments with automatic function, but they're not socially maintained. They're not contingent on the social environment the same way access and escape are. So an automatic function is something we do just because it feels good to us. All right. I worked with a boy years ago, and he put his hand out and he shook his finger just ever so slightly. And he would do that behavior versus eating or playing with toys or watching something on TV. That was reinforcing to him to have that finger just kind of quivering as far as his arm was away from him. So he'd have a straight arm and move that finger. A more normal example for us, or some of us, when we're sitting down, we bounce our leg, right? There's nothing we're gaining from the environment for doing so, nothing we're getting away from, but it's something we do because it feels good. We don't even think about it. That's what makes it automatic. It's something that doesn't really follow those basic contingencies as closely. So what we'll talk about more today will be that access and escape. Okay, the automatic can be there, but we want to first be real clear and rule out that there's a gain or an avoid when we're looking at teaching new behaviors or decreasing interfering behaviors. So there are a lot of reasons why behaviors can happen. Like I said, the first task is to identify what it is that's happening. I know kids I've worked with, both in a professional context or personal, it's not typically just one behavior. There's a number of things that are going on. But we want to look at those behaviors. We want to think about, when do they happen? When do they happen most often? Not necessarily the time of day, although that could be it, but what's happening before that behavior happens? For an example, when I brought up my son and him kind of putting his fist on the table, that happened most often when it was time to get off of the gaming system. He didn't like to stop playing games, and that happened most often when he had to stop doing something he enjoyed. The next thing we look at is what happens after that behavior. What is the thing that immediately follows that? Well, when my son did that, he knew he got my attention. And before I kind of got on to what was happening, I might say to him, okay, I'll give you a few more minutes. And what I was doing really was reinforcing that hitting his hand. As I got better at it, I said, you know what? If you need a few more minutes, you need to let me know that, and instead of your fist hitting the table. I was teaching him to use his words. Even though he was fully verbal, his fist on that table worked easier for him. And so I wanted to kind of change that. So when we're looking at behaviors, we need to think about what happens beforehand and what follows that behavior. And we call that the three-term contingency. That works with all kinds of learning as well. You know, I have a granddaughter that Deb brought up, and she's just about 1, so she's on a really high learning curve, and she's learning words, and she's learning, she makes faces at herself. That's all things she's learning. When I wave at her and say, hi, she's starting to wave back. That's something she's modeling. And then I say, oh, you waved at me, and oh, how great. Or if she cries, you know, we pick her up. Do you need your pants changed? Are you hungry? We meet those needs, and that's a three-term contingency as well. So that's what we're going to talk about here for a few of these slides. An antecedent is something that immediately occurs before the behavior. I like to say it occasions or it triggers the behavior. So when we're looking at changing behavior, we have to kind of sometimes gather information or think about what exactly is happening right before that behavior happens. The behavior itself is the thing we started out talking about. It's something that we can measure. It's something that we can see clearly. There are always feelings attached to behaviors, but we can't measure feelings, so we aren't able to say if things are getting better or worse. The hope would be as behaviors improve that feelings are better all the way around for everyone. But behavior is what the behavior, the person is doing. Whether that's, I put some examples there, yelling or talking, crying, could be helping, walking, raising your hand. So then what we look at is the consequence. How has the environment responded to that behavior? That's the whole three-term contingency. Like I said, with my granddaughter, I see her, she sees me, I wave at her. And if she does anything that looks like a wave, I say, oh, you waved at Nana. And I give her a big hug, and I do things she enjoys. And my hope is that she'll keep waving, right? So that's that antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So now we're going to do it with some real examples. Here is what my dog looked like when he was a puppy. His name is Max. I call him Maxwell Dogface, and he's kind of a ball freak. Okay, so a dog sees the ball, and he has balls all over the house, and that's the antecedent. The dog sees the ball is there, the dog sees the ball. What's going to happen next? He's barking. That's the behavior. He's barking. That barking was triggered, or it was occasioned by him seeing that ball, and I'm pretty sure he wants to play ball. Guess what happens next? I throw him the ball. And so that behavior works. And you know, we live in a house here in Iowa. And so when we moved to California and he barked, when he was at home, I'd say, I can't play right now, Max. When we moved to California, we lived in an apartment. And I probably reinforced that behavior even more because I didn't want to get in trouble. So I would respond to that barking right away. And so his barking has increased when he wants to play ball because he knows that I'm going to throw it because I want to shut down his noise, I guess. So that's a three-term contingency right there, right? When the dog barks, a person usually plays ball. So the barking that the dog is doing reinforces playing ball with a person. Here's another example, and this is something we see at school. Okay, it's time to do our 1-minute math multiplication. It's time to do some hard work. Oh, this math is so stupid. Gosh, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it. Or I put my head down. Some kids aren't loud about it. They put their head down or they cry. What happens? Maybe the teacher comes over and says, what's wrong? Let me help you with that. Let's do the first few together and I'll help you. So what has happened in essence is the teacher has made that work easier, either by offering help or doing it with the student. And so what's happened is that sulking behavior is going to be reinforced, right? The next time that boy gets some hard work without being taught to raise his hand or say, I need help, he's probably going to go to a behavior that has worked for him in the past. So when hard or non-preferred work is given, the boy refuses to complete it. Refusing, and for this boy, refusing looks like sulking like that. Refusing occasions the teacher to assist the boy with doing the work. So that hopefully makes sense. I love this graphic because I think it really helps us. You know, when we see a behavior, there's so many things underneath that behavior that we're not always privy to or aware of. Like I said before, though, in a behavior world, we want to be thinking about things that we can socially mediate in our environment. And those typically come from an escape or an avoid scenario or from a gain scenario. Different kinds of differences, different learning histories combine to make that behavior look certain ways. I, as a person who has a lot of college, right? I don't often yell, but I might just talk, right? Not that I don't ever yell, but I'm saying sometimes I over talk, and I think that is what I do, either to get somebody to understand what I'm saying or to say, I already know about this. I don't need to know about it anymore. That might be different than a sixth grader who doesn't have as much experience verbalizing, I guess. So behavior is what we see at the tip top, like this iceberg, but there's just a ton of things underneath. So working on things from a behavioral perspective is one thing we do, but we also have lots and lots of other things that are under that surface of the water we want to be aware of. I'll say with this one, I have worked with students who have, let's say, ADHD, and they're on medication. And sometimes there's a medication change or medication that they've taken a vacation from medication. Behaviors can look very different. What I like to think about is maybe we need two plans. We need a plan when they're on medication because their behaviors look different, and one when they're not. I often talk to teachers about when kids are stable, when we don't see a lot of that iceberg at the top, that's a great teaching opportunity, right? That's a great time to be teaching how to get help, how to say, I don't want to do it, because maybe they're going to have more attention to that because they don't have so many other things kind of going on under the water at that very moment. Just to say this another way, behavior primarily serves two social functions: to gain something, which I've listed out some things that could be money, food, toys, or hugs, attention, and there's more. These are just examples. It also could serve an escape function or an avoidance function, and that might be unwanted tasks or some kinds of foods or something scary. It could be attention. I know that there's a lot of people that don't like a lot of social attention, and I'm one of those people. I will disappear if I can because social attention sometimes is uncomfortable. Remember, behavior serves two primary social functions. So considerations when we're working to change behavior include these three things. We want to find ways to prevent it from happening. And sometimes we can, and sometimes we can't. I can say, yeah, you can have one more minute to do this, but at some point, bedtime's going to come. At some point, we have to leave the house. We want to teach. We want to teach what we want to see. We want to teach an appropriate behavior that meets the same needs as the problem behavior, the interfering behavior, but it's something that's more appropriate, something that they can carry with them for their lifetime. And we want to give feedback. And our feedback is going to look different if it's a behavior we want to see versus a behavior we don't. I like to say front loading for that prevention side. And if people that are watching this have kids that have behavior intervention plans at school, there's a section there called prevention/antecedent strategies. Those are things that we want to be doing on the front side. In a home environment, same thing. Those are things we want to do on the front side. When my son would get on the gaming system, I'd say, remember, I'm going to come in when you have 10 more minutes, and then I'll come in when you have 5 more minutes. And if you want a little more time, you need to use your words. And he'd say, okay. And that helped. That was stuff that I did on the front side. That was a prevention strategy. We're going to teach a model what we want to see, and then we're going to have some response strategies. If it's something we like to see, we want to see more of, we want to reinforce that in a way that makes sure that it happens again. If it's not something that we want to see, if it's an interfering behavior that happens, we want to not give that behavior as much attention, if that makes sense. And that's hard. Can be kind of hard stuff, especially when we have kids that they just kind of wind up. We say, nope, you can't do that. And then they take it to the next level. So a lot of times when that happens, we have to really be clear on that prevention stuff. And we might be trying to change too much at one time, that it becomes unmanageable for us to manage. So here's some things I was thinking through, wanted to share with you some things that we can do on the front side. I have some words there and some pictures, but why we do it is that it decreases the need to use that interfering behavior or increases motivation to use a more appropriate behavior, right? Like this picture of the note, shower, brush teeth, stay busy, it's okay to be okay. That's kind of a mini schedule. I took pictures of all the rooms in my house. I helped my kids clean the rooms. And then we all took turns. We all had rooms that we cleaned, but they could look at that picture and know that's what it needed to look like when they were done. That was a prevention strategy I used at home. Choices can be something that are really powerful. I just put like a pear and an apple and a banana there, but giving choices, you know what, we need to get this done. You want to do it now and then take a break, or do you want to have some time now that we can do something you want to do and then we'll do that? Do you want to do the bathroom? Do you want to clean the bathroom, or do you want to clean the hallway? My kids always had to clean their own rooms, but then we had like the common rooms that were up for grabs we took turns with. Visual supports are something that are really helpful, right? I put the silverware sorter because it made it really clear what goes where. When I was teaching my kids to do their own laundry, I had 2 laundry baskets, one for colored clothes and one for white clothes. I wouldn't have to like be there every time they sorted it, but I could then say, wow, you got all the white clothes in the white clothes thing, or they came up with something that was gray and they're like, I don't know which one, mom. And so I could help them problem solve through that. So antecedent strategies are those things we do on the front side to help increase the use of what we want to see and decrease the need to use those interfering behaviors. You know, with schedules, sometimes, like with my son, I'll use him as an example. I would say, I need you to clean your room, or I need you to do your homework. Here's what happened in real life. He went to a Montessori school here in Des Moines. He had a work plan and he would do his work, and I had his computer, or I had his gaming system in my room. So when he got his work done, then he got his computer. So he saw the schedule of what needed to happen, and at the bottom was his gaming system. And then he'd get his work done, and I'd say, great job, you got it done. And then I would get the gaming system out and he would get to play. That second step is that we want to teach and model what we want to see. And so that's where I think understanding the purpose of that behavior is so important. I want your attention. I need help. I don't want to be alone. Those are some examples. When we want to see a behavior, again, we have to show them what it looks like. When they're learning it, sometimes it's not going to be perfect. When my granddaughter started waving at me, it didn't look much like a wave. It was like, just if she moved her hand a little bit, I'd say, great job. Or I might even take her little hand and move it. Oh, you waved at Nana. Good job. When we're teaching that behavior, we just want it to look like something like what we want to see. It'll keep getting better if we keep using it and they keep using it. So when we want to teach a new behavior to replace a behavior that is existing, that is interfering. If I'm using a behavior of putting my head down because I'm overwhelmed and this work is really hard, I'm going to find the easiest thing for that person to do. You know, if I go to put my head down and I just put my hand up, what can I do to help you? Or I might even not even start there. I might say, I know this is going to be really hard for you. Let me help you. Offering that before that behavior happens gives that sense of, oh yeah, I can ask for help with this. Remember, you can ask for help. So I might help a little bit. If you need help, let me know. And then they just stand there for a minute. Oh, it looks like you still need some help. So I'm kind of working towards getting them to be independent with that, but I'm starting where they're at. Response strategies, I think, can be where it gets kind of tricky for us in how we respond. And this is kind of an overview, but response strategies to what we want to see is what we call reinforcement, right? I work a job because I get paid. I like helping people, but I also like a paycheck. So that's part of my reinforcement for doing what I do. Sometimes it's not something tangible. Sometimes it's just that hug or thumbs up, you did a great job. Sometimes it's our time. I think we're so busy. And I think sometimes when we're home with our kids, we're so busy doing other things, laundry, cooking, chores, those sorts of things, helping with homework. We don't just spend time. So we want to reinforce behaviors we want to see with something that our kids find reinforcing. My son wanted my attention, even though I felt like he got it all the time. And so I would have time for just he and I. It was our time. It was kind of like our date, if you will. And if he got his stuff done, we had time at the end of every day to do what he wanted to do. And that was real powerful. I have an example here. If we believe our child uses interfering behaviors to get something, we want to provide it if they ask appropriately. Sometimes we have to have them ask appropriately before we can put limits on it, right? Because if we just limit it, they're going to keep using that behavior because it works. Or the only way they're going to get it is if maybe we're not paying attention or we're busy and we give it to them anyway. My son was real big on the it. He wanted things. He wanted his gaming system always. And so I had to first teach him how to ask for it appropriately. And then I would give it to him. And I didn't always let him have it every time he asked for it, but to start with, so they use that instead of crying or tantruming, I would say, what is it that you want? And I could even show him a picture. I want my computer. I want my gaming. Okay, thanks for using your words. And then I could let him have access. But I kept looking for that to be something he became more independent with doing. Now, when behaviors are happening that we don't want to see, we're going to be doing things a little bit different. Like I just brought up with my son, if you're watching a show or your kids are watching a show and they throw a fit and you say, okay, you can stay up for one more TV show, that might reinforce that throwing a fit when it's time to get off. If you say it's time to go to bed and you're scolding them, what's happening? You've delayed bedtime and you're giving a lot of attention. When we scold, we give a lot of attention. We probably talk longer to our kids when we're scolding. Our voices are more animated and we stop what we're doing. So that's something to think about. If my kids want my attention and I'm like, hey, do you not see that I'm really busy here? Blah, 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 blah. I'm giving them a whole bunch of attention for them having problem or interfering behaviors to get my attention. If it's time to go to bed, it's time to get off of TV, I could say to them instead, remember, you can earn extra time for TV on Friday night by doing your chores, or I know you really want to watch that show, but we can watch it again because it's on Netflix. That way you're staying true to what you said you're going to do, and you're also letting them know that this isn't the end of it ever happening again. When behaviors happen for attention that we are interfering, I like to use what's called planned ignoring, and that's that we don't ignore our child, but we ignore that behavior and we certainly don't let it get what they want. They want my attention and they want to read a book. You know what? We need to clean up. We've already talked about that. When you get this cleaned up, we can read that book. When you finish your homework, then let's pick out something you want to do. So we want them to know it's available and that they're valuable, but that their behavior isn't going to work to get that. That's how we kind of get things moving the other direction. So here's another look at this, reinforcing interfering behaviors. We've got that antecedent, we've got that behavior, and then we have that consequence. It's time to get off. Ah, I don't want to. Okay, just one more show. What's going to happen the next time it's time to get off? Probably that crying is going to happen again. That's kind of what I have for everybody today. Here's some great resources that I think are great. The National Autism Center, we call that NAC, and there's their website. They have a parent's guide to evidence-based practice and autism. I find these evidence-based practices good for lots of kids, not just kids with autism, but it would also help you if you have kids with IEPs or behavior plans to look at what's on their plan and does it in any way line up with what's at the National Autism Center. This is very research-based, really a great resource. The Behavior Babe, she's a behavior analyst also. She's just very user-friendly, if you will. You can ask her questions. She's got a caregiver's corner. She just has a ton of resources on her website. And when I go to conferences, if she's there, I always go to see her. I love the Center on the Social and Emotional Foundations for Early Learning. I think they have really nice resources on there. So I wanted to put that out there for you. And then Robert Schramm wrote this book called The 7 Steps for Earning Instructional Control. And when we have kids that are just really struggling, I just find that he has an article you could put in a Google search, 7 Steps for Instructional Control, and it'll be a PDF, it'll come out. But it really speaks to that 3-term contingency we're talking about. We want kids to know that we're fun, that we want to be with them, that we want to do fun stuff. We want to be a person of our word. If we say it's time to get off, it's time to get off. So he really speaks to that. It really helps, I think, all kinds of learning, appropriate learning happen, whether that's for behavior or other purposes, by reading through those 7 steps for instructional control. So that's what I have for everybody today. And again, if you have questions, I think that Deb and I have a little system worked out. Let me know. And other than that, I'm just really thankful to be able to share this information.
Thank you, Wendy. We actually do have some questions from our current audience. I love the name Behavior Works, right? You unlayered. Right. Yeah, we all are driven by some sort of behavior, and that iceberg visual, I think, is so powerful. As a parent, that helped me better understand that all that stuff underneath, I wasn't paying attention to. I just had that tiny spot at the top. And
right.
So it made it frustrating, right? But then when you understand all of it, that helps you open up your eyes in a bigger way. One of our audience members says, great examples of the 3 terms of contingency. So thank you. That was excellent.
Thank you.
So we have some questions. You said behaviors learned. How long can it take to unlearn a behavior?
There's research out there a long time. I mean, a lot longer than it takes to learn it. I would say if you're practicing some problem behaviors, it could take years, really, because each individual environmental situation is going to be a little bit different, and you might get really good at it, and then all of a sudden you go back to what was working before. You go back to your go-to. The more that we consistently don't reinforce that interfering behavior and we teach a new way, the faster the change will happen. So if that makes sense, it's kind of like, if sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, that's why gambling works, because sometimes you get paid and sometimes you don't. So if you're going to, when behaviors sometimes get reinforced, but sometimes they don't, they make those behaviors more durable, and it takes a lot longer for them to change. Does that help? Does that make sense?
It does. And I just think about both at home and school. It's not a quick fix, right? You have to stick with it. And that's the importance of that partnership between home and school and having that connection. Another question, you mentioned behavior intervention plans. Can you talk about ways to ensure a BIP is appropriate and working for the child, possibly integrity checks?
So a behavior intervention plan should be written around a functional behavior assessment. That's where all that 3-term contingency stuff that we've talked about, that's where that goes in. So, and we also want to know that they're keeping data, they're keeping progress monitoring data. And we want to make sure that the things that are in that plan are actually happening. And that's where an integrity checklist comes in, or a component checklist. It's called different things, but it's basically a recipe, right? If I want to make chocolate chip cookies and I put a different set of ingredients in every time, they are not going to taste like chocolate chip cookies. So when I work with teachers and educators, that's how I talk about it. I talk about, we want to get here, and to get here, we need to put these things in place. And we can't say that this plan's not working if we're not using 6 of the 10 things we have in the plan. We could find that we don't need this part, or this part isn't working, but if we don't run the plan the way that we've designed it, we won't be able to answer that question. So an integrity checklist is basically, it's like a troubleshooting manual, I guess. It's kind of like a quick read. It should be the behavior plan, and it should be all the parts, just yes, no, or not applicable. Yes, no, or not applicable. When and if you have your child with a behavior plan, I want you to be looking for a lot of things in the prevention part and the teaching part. If you see your child's plan doesn't have anything there but a whole bunch of consequence strategies, it's probably not a real balanced plan. So I hope that answered that question.
I think that's a good first step. It just makes me want to spend more time with you and spend, have families join us so that we can dig into some of that. I got another question for you. Students that have a BIP in school, do you recommend that the families follow the same type of plan at home? How would you see that playing out?
I think it's helpful if possible. I think, and it depends. If school's teaching your child to do something at school to get help in this way, I think if you do the same thing, if you're having struggles at home that way, that's a double win because it's more consistent. I think sometimes at home, we don't see the same problems that school sees because they're different environments. I know my son went to a Montessori school. He went to Coles here in Des Moines, and he went there from the age of 3 until 8th grade. And so they saw very few problems with him because the routine was very well, he just knew it because he'd been there since he was 3. He knew exactly how to do his work. At home, we went to Little League, we went to basketball, we went out to the mall. We had different things we were doing. And so we had sometimes different issues that came up. I think if you have a child that's learning some communication, I would love for that to be both at home and at school. I worked with a little guy years ago, and his mom he was blind, and so was his mom. So we taught some modified signs with her help because she had to be able to hear the difference, right? And we did it at school, and they did it at home. And that really helped. This little guy made a lot of progress because all of a sudden he had a way to talk to us and we had a way to talk to him. And because he got to practice it both places, it helped it, I think, be effective quicker.
Well, Wendy, a great presentation. I'm excited again to connect with you down the road. So thank you for sharing a little bit of your expertise. I know families are very interested in this topic and that connection between home and school. So I'll look forward to finding time on your schedule again so that we can further explore the topic of behavior works. Thank you,
Yay!
Wendy.
Thank you.